Welcome to session 1 of Resting in Winter. This is a Yin-Restorative type series where we delve into the aspects of winter and how they apply to our healing and growth and post-traumatic growth, really, because there's more than just post-traumatic stress, and the growth that we receive after trauma is just as important to note as the trauma itself. So I invite you to have all of the props today and for this whole series: bolster, blocks, and more than one blanket. So I'm gonna have a blanket underneath me, and then there's gonna be times when we need an additional blanket as a prop. And then if you want another blanket to drape over yourself, then that would be even a third blanket. So depending on what you need, go ahead and have it with you. Grab whatever it is. And I invite you to begin in a supported child's pose. There's a couple different ways you can come into this shape. I'm going to show you how I come into it, and then I'll kind of give some options from there. And if you already know how you like to be in a supported child's pose, you can just find your way there instead of listening to me gab away. So option 1 is to have your bolster in front of you. And I like to have the bolster on the inside of my knees, and then my toes are touching back behind me. And I'm sitting my hips back toward my heels and simply finding your way down onto the bolster. Now, if you feel really supported there, you can stay there. Or if you'd like the bolster to actually be closer up toward you and further away from the floor, use your blocks to adjust the height as needed. And you can set it at the lowest height, medium, tall, whatever it may be. So that's the second option. When you find the version of this shape that you want, you could start to settle in. Allowing yourself to make adjustments and kind of fiddle around with the blocks or the props until you find exactly where you want to be. This is your practice. This is your time. Everything in this class is up to you. It's your choice. You don't have to do anything that you don't want to do. You don't have to stay in a pose that is causing harm or that you just don't want to be in. You could simply leave that shape whenever you want. No permission needed. And if this child's pose, because we're going to be here for a little while, if this is just not where your body wants to be today, and you would prefer to take a different shape, please do so. And we'll be here for the next 12 to 15 rounds of breath. As we begin to contemplate our theme and intention for this class today, which is roots. During the winter, it looks like everything is dead and stripped away, and in some ways it is. All the greenery is stripped away. All the flowers are gone. And it looks a little barren. But winter is a season in which the roots go deeper into the earth. All of the nutrients and nourishment from the plant leaves the flowers and the stems and the stalk, and it goes into the roots so that the roots have a food source. They have nourishment to weather the winter and to establish a stronger and a wider base. And we can't see what's happening underground unless you dig up and disturb what's happening in the roots. But we know that it's happening, even if we don't see it. And especially when we don't know how long winter is going to be or when it's going to make way for spring. We do know that it won't last forever. We'll take another 3 or 4 rounds of breath here. And in your own timing, if you feel complete here and ready to slowly make your way out of child's pose, you might begin to press away from the earth. Slowly and taking your time. And taking just a breath or two to arrive in this in-between place, this in-between one shape and the next. And we can begin to bring our legs around. And here is where you'll need blocks, bolster, and a blanket. So if your blocks are out of reach, go ahead and grab them. And this next shape is a forward fold, but it's going to be really supported. Since our legs were just kind of crunched up underneath us, let's stretch them out. So let me move all of this so you can see what's happening. I like to have my legs about hip distance apart. However, if you would like a little bit more space in your body today, if your body would appreciate that, you might take your legs as wide as your mat or maybe even wider depending on your needs today. So you choose the stance for your legs. And then underneath your knees, and this is optional, but again, this is a restorative class, so I like to take all the support. So take a rolled up blanket and place it underneath your knees. This creates a micro bend so that your hamstrings aren't being so pulled, especially when we aren't exactly warm. And then your blocks can go to varying heights. I'm gonna start here at the tallest height just because usually that's where it ends up for me, but you can choose. So legs can be at any width you want, blanket or no blanket underneath the knees, that's up to you. And then 1 or 2 blocks so that our bolsters can set right on top. Now, it might take some finagling to get into this shape in a way that is supportive for your specific body. Now, depending on where you're at today, this might be a good place. You might simply just bring your forehead and rest your head. Or another option is to angle your bolster. So to angle it, you could use just the one block, kind of bring it a little bit closer so that your bolster is like sitting on your lap and being propped up by your block. And then kind of draping yourself over to your desired location. Now, again, how you place the blocks, how you place the bolster really needs to suit your body. So if neither of these options works for you, please find another version that does. It might even look like taking your two blocks and even like stacking them on top of one another if you need more height. It might look like, what's another option? Could look like removing the blocks completely, actually, if you want the bolster just over your legs, and then to drape yourself this way. So there's lots of options, and you can choose for your body based on your needs. And we'll be here for about 20 breaths or so, give or take 20 to 22 breaths. So please tune into your body so that you know what you need here. While we're here, I'd like to read to you just a short passage by an herbalist and trauma therapist. Her name is Brigit McNeill. And speaking of winter and this season, she writes, "Our lives are not linear, but like seasons. We undulate, we spiral round, we wax and we wane, we unravel and restore. Autumn and winter remind us that our endings are natural, not pointless or complete failures, but an essential part of living, of growth. And when we open to the teachings our decomposing brings, it will feed our seeds with a deeper knowing of self, with courage and care, becoming the fertile decay from which we grow." My hope for you in this class today is that we can take everything that we have experienced in our lives up until this point, all of the things that were difficult, that were hard, that were painful, perhaps view them through the lens that they are fertile decay, giving way to new growth, to new beginnings, to healing. And here you might be contemplating that fertile decay and new growth, or if it's more helpful, if you find your mind wandering away from this practice, I invite you to tune into your legs here. Noticing that your legs can represent your roots, and in fact
the area around your tailbone. And into your legs is where we hold our root chakra. Perhaps even bringing some awareness to the muscles around your tailbone. Observing here if they are tight or engaged, or perhaps softened. And there's no judgment, no correction needed, just simply noticing what currently is. As we take our last couple breaths here in this forward fold. And when you're ready to slowly make your way out of this shape, you could begin to lift your head, walk your hands back, and pause at the top. Let's pause in the in-between, not rushing away from this moment that we've created. Observing how you feel. And if it feels welcome, you might even move the props away, perhaps moving through your ankles or your toes. And then we'll continue to move on to our next shape if you'd like to move with me. And here we'll be coming into a supported lunge. Now, this rolled up blanket that we have here, we'll still need it, and we might even just leave it where it is if space works out that way. And using your 2 blocks, you can kind of create some pillars here. And then place your bolster on top so that it's nice and long in front of you. Then we'll start to come onto a tabletop, and your rolled up blanket, honestly, you're just gonna have to figure out the spacing. I have not yet figured out like a appropriate spacing until I'm just like in the pose. So just know that you'll probably need to move it unless you kind of hit it on the first try. So from your tabletop, you could begin to step your right leg forward, your right foot forward. And where we want to end up as far as like using these props, where you end up if the props don't work out for you is totally fine if you want to change it up. But we want the bolster to be underneath us enough so that we feel like we can put our whole weight on it. So this feels a little bit forward for me, so I'm gonna move myself forward. And that feels better for my body. And then if you notice the rolled up blanket, so it's on my left quad, it's supporting my left quad. My knee is not actually on the blanket. It is actually, my knee is barely touching the floor because the blanket is providing that support. You might not like the blanket there, and if so, you can just toss it and remove it. But if it does feel welcome, if it creates an extra sense of support, then feel free to adjust it as needed. And then your back left foot might even have your toes tucked, not so that you have to continuously have engagement there, but if you kind of tuck your toes and notice that you can let go of those muscles in your feet, then that might be helpful for your left knee if you're experiencing any discomfort. Or you could just rest the top of your left foot on the floor. And then here we have some choices with our upper body. You could come onto your elbows, onto your forearms, or you could even prop your elbows and then rest your forehead on your hands. Or if this just feels like it's too much of a stretch for where your body's at in this moment, you could ease your way up and have your hands resting on the bolster. So we'll take a little while here, and then we'll go from a low lunge into a supported lizard. But you might actually kind of already be in the lizard depending on where you're at. But either way, this is where we'll hang out for about 10 breaths. And just know that at any point that you want to leave a shape, you can. Even if I'm still here, even if I haven't left the pose, you do not need my permission. The only permission you need is yours. It's your body, your practice. Take another 5 breaths here. Can you bring some awareness to the muscles around your tailbone? Noticing what kind of state they're in. And if it would feel helpful, or if there's a measure of safety there, would it be okay to invite the muscles around your tailbone to soften either a little bit or a lot? You choose. And just notice what happens. Option to ease into a supported lizard pose here, which we don't need to move too much, but you might allow your right knee to just peel out toward the right, maybe even coming onto the blade of your right foot. And you don't have to push it or force it. You can kind of let gravity just peel open. And then you might even ease your way a little bit further down toward the bolster if that space is available. And if it's not, that's okay. There's no requirements here. And we'll hang out here for another 10 breaths. And then you might start to press yourself away from the bolster. If it feels welcome to lengthen through your front right leg, option to take a pause here. Maybe windshield wiper your right ankle back and forth, getting a little bit of movement. And then stepping back whenever you're ready. Maybe even having a seat for just a second. I know that can be such a deep stretch, even with the props. So if you'd like to take your hands back behind you, feet could find their way out nice and wide, and then maybe windshield wiper your knees from side to side before we head into the next shape. Okay. And then we'll find our way into low lunge on the other side. Now that you know where we're going, if it's helpful to kind of just dive right in, you know where you want to go, where you want to be, you can start adjusting your props. And this side of your body can be super different. So if you find that what worked on the other side is just not working on this side, that's okay. You can kind of go back to the drawing board, start adjusting your props. Anything goes here. Whatever you need to feel supported is welcome. And we'll start here in our low lunge for 10 breaths. Returning back to the awareness around your tailbone. Is it okay to soften this area of your body? Our lives are not linear, but like seasons. We undulate, we spiral round, we wax and wane, we unravel and restore. We unravel and restore. Winter feels like a time of restoration for me. I didn't used to. I didn't used to like winter very much. I didn't enjoy the limbs of the trees that were stripped bare. They looked ugly to me, to be honest. And now I see such a beauty in them. I see a beauty because I relate to feeling stripped bare. And oftentimes our life experiences that are difficult can make us feel that way. Kind of barren. But I see the beauty in it because I know what's happening underneath the surface. The roots that are digging so deep. The roots that are growing stronger, establishing a wider base. Option to take your supported lizard pose if you'd like, allowing your left knee to peel over to the left if it hasn't already. You might even allow your left foot to kind of peel off of the mat as well, heading on over to the left blade of your foot. Another 8 breaths here. However, you can leave whenever you want. Beginning to find a sense of completion as we begin to move away from our bolsters. Option to lengthen through your left leg, maybe swivel your left foot from side to side. And then sitting back whenever you're ready, taking a pause. And we'll begin to find our way into a supported pigeon pose. And there's a couple different ways you can come into this shape, as with all the shapes, just because the props mold to be what you need them to be. We're still going to use our rolled up blanket. You don't have to use it if you don't want to, but I do like the extra support it brings. So we'll have our bolster right in front of us. I'm choosing to remove my blocks right now. I like to start there and then add the blocks in if needed. And leaning over our bolster in our tabletop, you might stretch your right leg out, maybe give your ankle and toes a little bit of movement. And then drawing your right knee in and planting your right foot. I'm gonna lift my bolster just so that you can see what's happening. I'm gonna wiggle my right foot over to the left. And then I'm gonna start to settle in. So I'm gonna pick up my back knee. I'm gonna shift my hips back. And then the blanket, honestly, it fell perfectly for me this time, but that almost never happens. So if you need to move your blanket, please do. Where you kind of want it to end up is really supporting underneath your right hip especially, but because it's that long cylinder, it'll go across both hips. So feel your way into it. Don't worry about it being quote unquote perfect, but rather, where do you feel supported? And so having your right hip supported, because that's the one that's forward for this side. And then having your bolster in front of you, you could drape yourself down. You could rest your forehead on your forearms here, or you could turn your head to one side, resting completely on the bolster. If the bolster feels very far away and you need it to be closer to you, this is where your blocks come in. This is where you can create another set of pillars, but I like to start on the lowest setting and then work your way up. So adjust as needed. And we're gonna be here for another 18 to 20 breaths or so. Autumn and winter remind us that our endings are natural, not pointless or complete failures, but an essential part of living, of growth. Noticing your hips. Noticing if there's any engagement around your hips, any muscles that are tensing or tightening. And if it feels okay, if it feels like you want to explore allowing your muscles to soften a little bit, especially if the blanket is underneath your hips, you might start to explore what it could be like to allow your hips to settle into the blanket, knowing that you will be held and supported. We'll take about 3 to 5 more breaths here on this side. beginning to find completion on this side. You could start to find your way up, taking your time, and switching sides when you're ready to. You might step your right leg back, maybe stretching it out. And then returning back to our tabletop, you could stretch your left leg back, maybe giving your ankle a little bit of movement. And then drawing your left knee forward, stepping your left foot forward so that your left ankle is over toward your right wrist. You could tuck your back toes, lift up on your back knee, and scooch your right leg back, creating some space for your hips to settle in. And as always, adjusting your props as needed. Until you feel settled. We'll be here for another 20 breaths before we move into our time of supported Shavasana, our final resting time. And when we open to the teachings our decomposing brings, it will feed our seeds with a deeper knowing of self, with courage and care, becoming the fertile decay from which we grow. Courage and care. It takes so much courage to show up and be in your body, to feel your body, to acknowledge your sensations and your feelings. And I celebrate you and I honor you in this moment of your courage. I acknowledge your courage. I acknowledge your growth. I acknowledge where you've come from, the season you're in right now, and the seasons to come. Another 5 or so breaths here. We'll begin to shift away from this shape if you feel complete. Taking your time, moving away and out of it. Whether you shift back into tabletop or swing your legs around, whatever is easiest. You can move through your legs. And I'd like to offer you a supported Shavasana at the wall. So Shavasana is our time of final rest. And there's a lot of ways you can go into your time of final rest. This is just the option that I'm providing today. But if it doesn't work out for you, that's okay. There are other options. So here's option one. I'm gonna place my blanket against the wall. You can move your mat, but whatever gives you that cushion and support. And then I'm gonna take my blocks and place them in the middle against the wall. And I do use both. You don't have to, but my bolster is quite thick. And the reason why I do this is so that it creates a slant of the bolster and so that the bolster isn't caving in and then it's not as supportive. So then I'll take my bolster and I'll lean it up against the wall and the floor. So depending on what you have available, your setup might look something like this. And then grabbing maybe another blanket or maybe another blanket or two actually. You could drape the blanket over you when we get into it, or you might like to create a little bit of support for your neck, which is what I'm gonna do here. You don't need a ton of support for your neck. Your cervical spine responds to quite a bit to just a small support. So I have my folded up blanket here, and then I'm literally just gonna roll it just once. The tiniest little roll, and that's gonna be where my neck goes. So if you want to come into this shape at the wall, you can bring one hip toward your bolster, hands can come behind you, and then start shifting back, maybe coming onto your elbows. So that you end up with your legs supported and draped against the bolster at an angle, and your ankles can reach the wall. And you can adjust your blanket and your props as needed. So if this shape calls to you, you can find your way here, or if you prefer to just rest lying on your stomach or your side or your back, just resting on your yoga mat, that is more than welcome. If lying down does not feel welcome at all, you could choose to stay seated, maybe resting your back against the wall so that you have a little bit of support. And then we'll be here for the next 4 to 5 minutes. And just know that I'll keep track of the time and I'll let you know when that time is complete. And I'll be quiet now for these last few minutes of class, but just know that I'm still here with you.
You can stay here in this place of rest for as long as you like. There is no need to rush away if this is still serving you. And if you are ready to come out of this time of rest, you might start to add some movement into your body. Just some small movements. If your legs are up the wall, you might start to draw the knees in toward your chest. Pausing here for a moment, or maybe even rolling onto your side and pausing there for a moment in a side-lying shape. In your own timing, you might press away from the floor and make your way up into any seated shape. Option to join me for one final collective breath together. You might leave your hands wherever they land, or you might bring your hands to heart center. And together, if you'd like to join me, you could exhale all of your air out. And then breathe in. Thank you for allowing me to guide you today. My hope for you is that you feel safe, connected, and at home in your body. Thank you.